It had been a few hard, long weeks of adulting for both Shana and I. We had already canceled 2 bait fishing trips and 1 actual fishing trip due to the weather. But one of the benefits of our local fishing group is that we let each other know when the bait is running. And I tried to go after work a few times, which was to no avail as all of the bait seemed to be active in the morning. All we wanted to do was stock the extra freezer with bait and take advantage of the really heavy feeding spree that the catfish were in. Although the lack of bait was the biggest issue, the rain was the most annoying. Not only were the river and feeder creeks flooded, but all the toddler safe fishing spots were either underwater or so muddy that they couldn't be used. So with this being known, I reached out to our friend Brandon. He had fished with us a few weeks prior from the bank, which resulted in a skunk. We had tried a new spot that we had seen other people fish before. This spot seemed to offer an opportunity at a large fish due to how close it was to the quote-unquote sweet spot below Chickamauga Dam. However, what it really offered was fast water and a ton of snags due to needing heavy weight to hold the baits in place. So even though that was a fun and relaxing evening, it resulted in no fish and got put on the back burner as a spot to try again in different conditions. So at this point we had fixed the annoying issue which was caused by the rain, but now for the bait. Brandon took his boat down to Nickajack Dam as rumor was the skipjack were running there. And it was at this point that I went blindly throwing a cast net below Chickamauga Dam while Shana was feeding our daughter supper. Between 2 cast nets and some drifting on Brandon's part, we managed to catch enough bait for both the trip and for the tournament that Brandon was going to be fishing in the upcoming weekend.
I'm so out chasing the feeling. I got nothing to believe in.
Wow, look at that. Isn't that pretty? Yeah.
I'm so out chasing the feeling.
Armed with a few large gizzard shad, 2 skipjack, and a cooler of small 4-inch shad, we proceeded to get ready for the trip.
And I'm so out chasing that feeling. Got nothing to believe in. Tell me why I'm breathing. Give me a reason right now. And I've got nothing to believe in. Give me a reason. I'm high.
Yeah, there were several 50s, 60s, and a few larger fish that had been posted on Facebook recently, which only added fuel to the fire of our desire for the big one. A fire that could only be trumped by the laughter and smiling of our daughter, who was in an extremely good mood and was as excited about being on the boat as we were.
You say hi to the camera? You say hi to the camera? Close enough. There we go.
Hey, you sit in the chair?
So with bait, good weather, and a happy toddler, we set off in search for 2 kitties. Our good fortune had us all in high spirits for about 15 minutes.
We can dance if you want to.
Shana and I both stopped dead in our tracks when the sound of a giant yawn came from our teeny tiny 2-year-old.
Dance, well, ain't no friends of mine.
At this point we were on a timer and one of 2 things had to happen. Either Josie had to fall asleep in the bottom of the boat, or we had to be entertaining enough to keep her happy for the whole trip. Thus the quest for the great nap began. Our first stop was a hole right in the middle of the main river channel, and while it did provide us with fun-sized fish, it was far from what we were after. Then Brandon reminded us of a phenomenon that occurs here on the Tennessee River. If the feeder creeks are flooded, sometimes you can catch a monster deep inside the creeks. The higher waters seem to make them want to get out of the current. Plus, the creek was muddy. Another theory among catfishermen is that the dirty water seems to keep them on the feed longer due to not fearing predators being able to see them. So we journeyed up into a muddy feeder creek. Now I remind you that we were after a big old catfish, so we were upping the bait size by quite a bit. I'm talking like a 10-inch shad was only 2 or 3 baits max. However, with being realists, we did have 2 rods with some of the smaller shad threaded on it just to keep the action going. And at this point we were waiting for any sign of life, while the energy levels of the 2-year-old were dropping fast. She already got upset twice for nodding off and was stomping around the boat trying to get into anything and everything that she could. While she was on the verge of collapse, one of the rods with the smaller shad went screaming downstream, only to be instantly broke off when we tried setting the hook. Although it got our adrenaline going, it wasn't enough for Josie, who was finally starting to snore on Shana's lap.
Oh, Brandon, fish from rod 1.
That was when the left-hand rod went down with a huge thump into a long, steady bend, which, as any catfisherman will tell you, tends to mean it's a larger fish.
Has it surfaced yet?
So Brandon picked up the rod and immediately realized that the fish was hung in a tree. That is when Brandon passed off the rod to Shana and the epic battle began.
Yeah. You like that, Shana?
Then what I witnessed could only be compared to a classic movie, where a fight happened underneath a streetlight during the cold depths of night. Dim lighting, grunts and sound of struggle, and background music that was provided by a crying toddler who was complaining about how tired she was.
Hang on, baby. Hang on.
Although we were only fishing in about 8 foot of water, the beast never surfaced. As the fight continued, Shana was beginning to tire. She wedged the rod between her legs as the Mad Cat's rod she was using just buried itself next to the boat. She looked more like a tuna angler than a catfish angler at this point. However, their slogan held true, as the rod did in fact bend, not break. As the fight continued beyond the 10-minute mark, bubbles were finally coming up from the chocolate milk we were fishing in. Then the whale, I mean fish, surfaced for the first time.
Hang on, baby. I know. Oh, man, that thing is huge. Oh, Shana, you're okay. You're okay. You're okay.
We stood there in awe at the giant fish we were looking at.
Is he in there? He's in there! Ah!
After scooping Shana's prize, it took a team effort to get lifted into the boat.
Yeah, he's definitely a big one. You ready, sir?
Yeah. 1, 2.
Oh, fat fish. Oh, man. The head on that thing. Huh?
That's not
No, it's nowhere close to. That's not a 100-pounder. That's a
no,
big
that's
one.
big, right?
That's a big one.
That's very big.
There was a moment of silence as even the baby had stopped crying and stared at the beast lying at the bottom of the boat. We then shuffled around to get away to this monstrous creature that somehow Shana was still able to hold after the long fight.
Fish.
Is it?
77.96 to 78.42.
Oh my God!
Holy crap! I'm excited for you.
She had earned her prize. 77 pounds of pure muscle laid across her arms, crushing her previous personal best by over 200%. Luckily for me, her being that tired meant that I would get all the rest of the fish. After roughly 15 more minutes in that spot, we decided to leave the creek as more and more driftwood was starting to bounce off the boat. We decided to move downstream from the creek and follow the very obvious seam of chocolate milk and water to the next big hole. And as a Hail Mary, we threw on big baits on all the rods. We weren't necessarily expecting a monster, but the conditions in the bite earlier on indicated that bigger baits weren't going to hurt our chances. At this point, Shana and Josie were both snoozing at the front of the boat and had been since the previous spot. Shana from the battle with a whale and Josie from being the maestro of the night with her orchestra of sleepiness.
Because you felt it.
Might be a fish biting that one.
Yep.
Then the next rod went off. This one went off like a normal blue cat bite, which I've always called a hit and run. It was also on Shana's bait runner reel, so the drag was set just tight enough for the current to not peel it off.
Bad one. It ain't. I don't think it's a 77-pounder, but.
As I switched the reel to the fighting drag, the line went slack. Did I miss the fish? Had something caught the line in the current, perhaps? I quickly reeled in the slack until the line got tight. There was definitely something on the other end, and it was swimming upstream towards the boat. Yet another behavior that is a sign of a larger fish. Was it possible that we could have two monsters in one night? Could we be that lucky?
Dude. Not as big as yours, Shana, but.
It's not as big, but it's freaking big.
Now, I'm not going to lie, this rod was set up with only 30-pound mainline, so I did baby it a little bit. However, I was using one of Brandon's leaders, which are crimped 150-pound test. And although this fight was nowhere near as long as the whale Shana fought, I was happy to see it also get brought into the boat.
Let's get a weight on this fish. Ooh, it's flickering between 59.9 and 60. It will not lock in. 60, 59, 60, 59, 60, 59. Okay.
60 pound fish that night.
Yeah.
A 56-pounder and a 77-pounder in the same night, in the same boat, within an hour of each other. It was absolutely insane to experience. One that I hope to experience once again someday, and one that will be a cherished memory for a very, very long time. Although there were lots of struggles to get through on this trip, it was all made up for in the end with a sleeping toddler and 2 giant catfish.